Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we bring breaking news of a dramatic military operation at sea that has left the world stunned in a single night as forces launched a massive strike on a floating cartel fortress in international waters, a structure that for years had served as a command center for one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the Western Hemisphere. The fortress was believed to be heavily fortified and untouchable, but in less than 2 hours it was reduced to twisted metal, smoke and flames. The scale and precision of this assault has set a new standard for maritime operations. The first signs of movement were detected just before midnight when radar systems picked up unusual activity in a section of ocean far off the Mexican coast. Intelligence had long suspected that the cartel maintained a floating stronghold in these waters, a massive steel structure resembling an offshore oil platform equipped with defensive weapons, radar jammers and docking points for fast boats and submarines. For years it had been hidden from law enforcement using advanced technology and intimidation tactics, but on this night as naval forces moved in determined to end its reign. The decision to strike came after weeks of surveillance. Satellites and drones tracked cartel activity around the fortress, confirming that shipments of weapons, drugs and personnel were being launched daily from this platform. It was more than a smuggling base, it was the nerve center of an empire. The operation was planned with extreme precision, every detail calculated from the angle of approach to the timing of each missile strike. The fleet chosen for the mission included destroyers, helicopters, drones and special forces teams trained for rapid assaults. As the Navy task force approached under the cover of darkness, the ocean was calm, but the tension on board was electric. Every sailor, every pilot, every soldier knew they were about to engage in a mission that would send shockwaves across the region. Orders were clear: neutralize the fortress, capture any key figures and leave nothing operational behind. The fortress was not just defended by armed cartel fighters, it was equipped with radar systems and heavy machine guns, and the cartel believed they were untouchable. But they were wrong. The attack began the moment the fortress radar systems went active. The first wave of missiles roared across the night sky, their exhaust flames lighting the dark ocean like streaks of fire. The impact came seconds later. The explosions were deafening. Fireballs erupted across the structure, tearing through its upper decks, sending steel beams flying through the air. Smoke billowed into the sky and the fortress began to shake under the force of the strike. Cartel fighters scrambled to respond, firing blindly into the dark, trying to find their attackers, but the Navy ships were positioned far beyond their reach. Helicopters closed in from above, their spotlights cutting through the smoke as drones provided real-time targeting data to the destroyers. Each shot was calculated, each impact surgical. The floating fortress, which had stood for years as a symbol of cartel power, was suddenly under siege from every direction. The second wave of strikes focused on the defensive towers. The cartel tried to fire anti-air weapons, but they were destroyed before they could lock onto targets. Fire spread rapidly through the structure. Ammunition stockpiles ignited, turning sections of the fortress into massive fireballs. The sound echoed across the ocean as metal groaned and collapsed into the water. Rus forces moved forward. Fast boats carried special forces teams to the lower decks where cartel fighters were still trying to organize resistance. The fighting on the decks was brutal. Short and one-sided cartel gunmen fired from behind steel barriers, but the response from the assault teams was overwhelming. Flashbangs burst through the night as elite soldiers stormed compartment after compartment, clearing every room. The cartel realized quickly that they were outmatched. Some threw their weapons into the water and tried to surrender. Others continued to fight but were pushed back step by step by the advancing forces. As the battle raged above, the main structure began to tilt, listing to one side as explosions tore through its slower supports. The heat from the flames was intense, smoke rising like a storm cloud. Helicopters hovered overhead, their rotor wash scattering debris across the sea. The night sky glowed orange with fire, and the sound of gunfire and explosions rolled across the waves like thunder. The fortress that had once been so feared was now a burning wreck, surrounded on all sides by warships. Inside the fortress, US forces found weapon caches large enough to arm an army. Crates of rifles, machine guns, rockets and ammunition stacked floor to ceiling. Secret rooms housed encrypted communication equipment, satellite phones and maps detailing cartel routes across multiple countries. This was a treasure trove of intelligence, a glimpse inside the secret logistics of a criminal empire that had operated with near total impunity for years. As the minutes ticked by, the resistance collapsed. What remained of the cartel fighters either fled into the water or surrendered. Helicopters lowered ropes as extraction teams moved key prisoners to naval ships for interrogation. At the same time, combat engineers planted controlled charges across the structure to ensure it could never be rebuilt. By the time the last teams withdrew, the fortress was burning uncontrollably, its steel superstructure glowing red-hot against the Black Sea. The final explosions came when the planted charges detonated in perfect sequence. The blast ripped through the core of the fortress, sending towers collapsing into the ocean. Waves surged outward from the impact area, glowing in the light of the fire. The once mighty stronghold of the cartel vanished into black water, leaving behind only smoke, flames and debris floating on the waves. In less than 2 hours, a fortress that took years to build was gone. The operation was a textbook example of overwhelming power, speed and precision. The cartel had invested millions in creating a floating stronghold that they believed was untouchable. They had used it to launch smuggling missions, to store drugs and weapons, and to coordinate their network across continents, but they could not defend it against the full force of the U.S. Navy. The destruction of this base is being called one of the most significant blows to maritime organized crime in modern history. Intelligence sources say that several high-value cartel figures were captured alive during the assault. Their identities are being kept confidential, but they are believed to be among the most senior leaders of the organization. Their capture could lead to the unraveling of multiple smuggling networks across the hemisphere. Evidence seized from the fortress will be used to target financiers, collaborators and offshore partners who helped sustain the cartel for years. The significance of this operation extends far beyond the destruction of a single structure. The floating fortress was a symbol of cartel power and reach, a statement that they could operate outside the law in the middle of international waters with no fear of consequence. Its destruction sends a clear message: no place is beyond reach, no fortress is untouchable, no empire built on fear and violence will stand forever. The impact of this mission will ripple through the underworld for years. As dawn approached, the smoke from the burning structure drifted across the ocean, black columns rising into the sky while naval ships remained on station securing the area. Divers and recovery teams began searching the wreckage, collecting intelligence equipment, weapons and any surviving evidence. Helicopters continued to circle overhead as sailors and soldiers stood on deck watching the last pieces of the fortress sink beneath the surface. Back at naval command centers around the world, analysts were already pouring through live feeds, intercepted communications and radar recordings from the battle. The precision of the strike was being praised by military strategists. It was an operation planned to the second, executed with flawless coordination between ships, aircraft, drones and special forces. Every step was designed to deliver maximum impact with minimum risk. By morning the news had spread globally. Media outlets reported the story as a decisive victory against a criminal organization that had long evaded justice. World leaders praised the operation, noting its importance for international security, trade routes and the fight against organized crime. The cartel had lost more than a base. They had lost their image of power. Their floating fortress, which had been seen as untouchable, now lay in pieces at the bottom of the sea. Intelligence agencies believe the loss of the fortress will trigger internal chaos within the cartel network. Rival factions will scramble to take control of the remaining routes, but without their command center, coordination will collapse. This gives international law enforcement a rare opportunity to strike further and dismantle what remains before it can rebuild. The next moves will be critical, but the foundation of the empire has already been destroyed. Those who participated in the mission will remember it for the rest of their lives. Sailors, pilots, special forces operators, they were part of something historic, a mission that not only removed a major threat but also demonstrated the power of coordinated modern warfare on the high seas. They stood on the decks of their ships as the last flames burned, watching the sun rise over a sea littered with the remains of a criminal empire that thought it could defy the world. As the debris sank into the ocean, the silence returned to the waters that only hours earlier were a war zone. The mission was complete, the fortress was gone, and the message was delivered in fire and steel. No one who saw it will forget the sight of that massive structure collapsing into the waves, a symbol of arrogance and power brought down by precision and force in a single night. The success of this operation marks a turning point in how maritime threats are confronted. The idea of floating fortresses controlled by criminal organizations has long been a challenge, but the events of this night prove that no matter how fortified, no matter how hidden, they can be found and they can be destroyed. The sea is vast, but there is nowhere to hide forever. This was more than just a battle, it was the end of an era for one of the most dangerous cartels in the hemisphere and the beginning of a new chapter in the fight against organized crime at sea. What remains now is the wreckage and the memory of a fortress that believed it could never fall but fell in a storm of fire, steel and determination.